Now, generally speaking, starter weapons in video games need to walk a fine line, giving the player just enough firepower to not feel totally useless from the jump, but also not being potent enough that you'll never want to use anything else. But when it came to these starter weapons, well, they blew everything else out of the bloody park, and you'd be happy to carry these day one weapons to the gates of hell and beyond just to show the devil how deadly they can be. However, with all these weapons flying about, I needed the razor-sharp steel blade of Gaz Jones to cut through the chaff, and so I've chosen their suggestion from last week's episode to be an entry in this video. And if you want to be part of next week's list, then have a think about what you'd pick as a video game failure that cost millions. So with this in mind, I'm Jules, this is FGS, and these are the 10 best starter weapons in video games ever. Number 10, Crowbar, Half-Life. It's simply impossible to think of Half-Life's Gordon Freeman without picturing him brandishing that distinctive red crowbar that he picks up early on in the game. Though this dead ordinary melee weapon might not seem particularly sexing or alluring, it's the perfect emblem to solidify Freeman's status as a scrappy underdog that is forced to make do amid perilous circumstances. Using it to smash boxes is one thing, but the crowbar truly comes into its own when swatting away errant headcrabs, making it indispensable in a pinch when you're low on ammo. While it lacks the jaw-dropping wow factor of the gravity gun introduced in Half-Life 2, the crowbar is about as utilitarian as melee weapons get, useful in a multitude of scenarios, and a shrewd embodiment of everything our embattled protagonist is. Additionally, it became a near-instant icon of the Half-Life franchise and has been widely referenced and parodied across all manner of video games ever since. Number 9. Beretta M9, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. Few video game franchises elicit the awe-inspiring power fantasy of handling a really badass weapon more than Metal Gear Solid, and yet Metal Gear Solid 2 handed players its most purely fun piece of artillery right away. The M9 trank gun lets players shoot pesky soldiers with non-lethal rounds which will then send them to the land of Nod for just a short while. And even if you're not one to quibble about killing the fleet of digital goons, the trank gun's absurd effectiveness to put a room full of soldiers to sleep arguably undermines the tension of the stealth gameplay itself. For one, it's super quiet and won't alert any nearby guards when you fire it, it's got a red dot sight which makes aiming a cinch, and ammo is freely available all over the place, so what's not to love here? It's more than merely functional though. The mechanics of holding up guards and putting them out, it's just a really damn fun one, and after all, who amongst us hasn't tranked a guard, waited for them to wake up, and then just tranked them again? Number 8. The Chain, Road Rash 2. Ah, you smell that? Well, it's not the smell of burning rubber, it's the supremely unpleasant aroma of skin being cooked by a 500-meter slide across a blistering highway, or, as it's known to some nostalgic players, Parfum de Road Rash 2, which also happens to be Gaz Jones's pick for this list. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking, whoa now, does this weapon even count, seeing as you start each race unarmed? Well, technically, yes, you're right, my friends. The chain is most definitely something you grab from other races like a greedy vulture, but in doing this, it becomes your starter weapon, and so on the thinnest of arguments, I'm including it today. Also, I'm putting it in because I really want to talk about this oft-forgotten series, and Gaz clearly knows my love for deep cuts. So let's talk chains, my dude, and how they absolutely rock in Road Rash 2. With one of these in your hands, you won't even bat an eye if somebody appears in your rearview mirror. Hell, you might even slow down to let them get alongside you to utterly pie them off in short order. If you get a chain early on in a race, you basically become Ghost Rider, pulling people to the ground and dominating the highways. Honestly, it's that good that actual racing skill is a distant second place requirement to victory in this game. Number 7. The Buster Sword, Final Fantasy VII. Quite possibly the most statuesque starter weapon in RPG history, and certainly in the entire Final Fantasy franchise, Cloud Strife's Buster Sword is instantly recognizable even to many who've never even played a single game in the series. Just as Half-Life's Crowbar is Gordon Freeman, the Buster Sword is Cloud, a comically gigantic extension of the man, which he lovingly twirls around when he's not using it to slice enemies to ribbons. Though it's certainly not the strongest or the most versatile weapon in the game, it's so damn cool looking you'll probably stick with it much longer than you really should. Thankfully, Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth both made it easier to keep the Buster Sword for the entire game, with Square Enix acutely aware of just how much fans love it. It would have been easy for a weapon this cartoonish to be summarily laughed off, but it somehow fits the game's larger-than-life tone like a glove. Number 6. the Air Taser, Syphon Filter. Now here's one for all the real freaks out there. Right from its very first level, Syphon Filter gives players access to the Air Taser, which lets you shock any unsuspecting goon in the vicinity into unconsciousness. But hilariously, if you keep firing the taser into an enemy for more than 5 seconds, their day will get a whole lot worse, as they'll suddenly burst into flames and swiftly be turned into a pile of ashen mulch. Even accepting that you need to stand still while firing the taser, and it does leave you wide open to being flanked by other enemies, its ability to flash fry your foes one by one without ammo restrictions of any kind no less makes it an all-timer weapon. The Air Taser's previously hilarious penchant for overkill emboldened an entire generation of young players to examine their inner psychopaths. Great. Number 5. Lancer. Gears of War. And talking of young players, here's a weapon that seems like it was dreamt up by one of the developer's teenage sons after an energy drink bender. We're talking, of course, about Gears of War's Lancer. Because being a supremely powerful assault rifle just isn't good enough apparently, the Lancer also has a chainsaw bayonet on the end, allowing you to get close and rip through a locust grunt like a hot knife through butter. For many, the Lancer is basically the platonic ideal of third-person shooter weapon, melding gorgeous form with literally killer function at both close and distant range, enough that many players won't even bother using any other gun. It's not merely the weapon that defines the Gear of War franchise, the Lancer is also symbolic of an entire generation of grungy, over-the-top third-person action games, and perhaps even the entire Xbox 360 era itself. It's a weapon that quickly became the envy of the genre, and one that basically every other developer making third-person shooters wishes they'd thought of first. Number 4. The Silenced PP7, GoldenEye 007. GoldenEye 007 starts players off with the Silenced PP7, based on the real Walther PPK German police pistol, a weapon that packs a whole lot of punch into a tiny, quiet package. While not capable of clearing a room as quickly or as violently as the game's arsenal of clunky spray-and-pray automatic weapons, there's something to be said for the PP7's discreet efficiency, especially if you want to avoid sending an endless spawn of enemies your way. Its mind-boggling accuracy combined with its deeply satisfying noise when fired ensures that it makes the player feel like they're truly embodying 007 more than any other weapon in the game. Again, it's not a flashy or wacky piece of kit in the slightest, but the PP7 can get you through the majority of the game with little issue and a ton of style. Number 3. The Blades of Chaos, God of War. God of War's Blades of Chaos are one of the ultimate nailed-it-in-one gaming weapons, proving so damn cool and fun to use that there's really little incentive to consider anything else in the original trilogy. A pair of bladed weapons chained to protagonist Kratos' arms, the Blades of Chaos allow players to annihilate enemies at both far and close range, smacking, swirling, and juggling them about with maniacal levels of glee. Hell, they were popular enough to be sorely missed throughout the majority of 2018's God of War, such that when Kratos finally dusted them off later on, it was a virtually unparalleled moment of fist-pumping euphoria. Fluidly chaining attacks together with these things just feels amazing, in turn letting players feel like they've embodied the series' namesake, a basically unstoppable destroyer of worlds. Now, we all love 2018's Leviathan axe, but it just doesn't hold a candle to the blades. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. Number 2. The Plasma Cutter, Dead Space. Dead Space's Plasma Cutter is a basically perfect creation, an ultra-satisfying projectile weapon that can easily see you through the entire game without much fuss at all. Powerful, accurate, and easy to both upgrade and source ammo for, the plasma gun can incapacitate most of the game's necromorph foes in short order, leaving you to dismember them at your pleasure. Once you've spent long enough using it, you're probably actually disadvantaged by swapping to any of the game's other weapons, such as the Plasma Cutter's ingenious fusion of potency and ease of use. It also happens to look great, and the ability to change the firing orientation from horizontal to vertical is a neat extra touch. Naturally, fans were terrified that changes would be made to the weapon for the recent Dead Space remake, but Motive Studios thankfully understood the virtue of, if it ain't broke, don't bloody fix it. And number 1, the M6D pistol, Halo Combat Evolved. And finally, there just couldn't be any other pick for the number 1 slot than Halo's M6D pistol. This is a starter weapon so hilariously overpowered that it almost feels wrong, and yet not quite. Design-wise, it might just look like a regular pea shooter, but in both the single-player campaign and multiplayer suite, this thing is a damn hand cannon. Despite its diminutive size and unassuming look, the M6D is extremely powerful and accurate, a result of Bungie co-founder Jason Jones changing the gun's damage values just before Halo went gold. Bless him. Even shielded up enemies should tremble in piss-panted fear at this one, because it can take them out with 3 well-placed headshots, and in case you needed a helping hand to make it a true shot, it also comes fitted with a scope. The M60 was deadly enough that some players actually complained about it being too lethal for the game's multiplayer, and so Halo 2 unfortunately replaced it with a considerably nerfed M6C. Then again, given that Halo 2 also introduced dual wielding to the franchise, it's fair to say that double fisting M60s would have turned the multiplayer into absolute anarchy. Well, more than it already was. And there we go, my friends. Those were the 10 best starter weapons in video games ever. I hope you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. And while you're dropping a comment or a like, why don't you also put down your suggestion for what you pick as a video game failure that cost millions, and you could be featuring in next week's episode. But until then, my friend, hope you're treating yourself well, hope you are treating yourself with love and respect, because you bloody well deserve it, you big ledge, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.